Welcome once again to the Brownstone, Wolfe's sanctuary of logic, orchids, and murder. Do tell us where in the world you're listening from, and don't hesitate to share your thoughts. If you enjoy these cases, consider liking and subscribing. Now then, shall we begin? Every good mystery deserves good company, and a little gratitude between cases. A warm thank you to Norma, our newest patron. Your support keeps the orchids blooming and the mysteries alive. Join the circle of mystery lovers on Patreon. Link in description. Nero Wolfe and the affair at the Queen's Rest Hotel. The phone rang at 11:58 p.m., the hour when New York's honest citizens are asleep and the others are either plotting or regretting. I was neither, just half through a sandwich and a pulp magazine, when the bell drilled through the quiet. I glanced toward Wolfe's closed bedroom door, where the light under the jamb meant he was reading Pliny and in no condition to accept mortal conversation. So, naturally, I lifted the receiver. "Mr. Wolfe's residence," I said. The voice that came through was the kind meant to sell perfume or confess sins, low, controlled, with a tremor she was trying to smother. "Is this Mr. Wolfe's assistant? Please, this is Celia Vale. I need help immediately." "Miss Vale," I said, "you sound like trouble in evening gloves. What kind?" "Poison," she whispered. "My fiancé, Howard Kessler. He's dying. I'm at the Queen's Rest Hotel, Suite 918. Please, tell Mr. Wolfe to come." Now, Wolfe has two favourite words, no and impossible. I knew what he'd say before I even knocked on his door. He opened it an inch, dressing gown loose, face a picture of irritation polished with civilization. "Archie, it is nearly midnight." "Yes, sir. A woman's called from the Queen's Rest Hotel. Says her fiancé's been poisoned. Name's Howard Kessler, theatre producer." Wolfe's brows made a roof. "You expect me to attend a melodrama at this hour?" "She sounds real and desperate. So do beggars. Call the police, or more profitably, return to your sandwich." "Sure, but if the lady's genuine, there's a retainer walking around somewhere in that marble palace." He sighed. A long exhale weighted with centuries of disappointment. "Archie, under no circumstances are you two—" The phone still hung in my hand. I set it down, grabbed my hat, and was halfway out before he could finish the sentence. By the time I reached Fifth Avenue, the air had that early spring chill that keeps cabs empty and consciences alert. The Queen's Rest Hotel looked the way Manhattan likes its memories. Too elegant to tear down, too expensive to forget. The revolving door turned slow, as if even the wind paid rent. Inside, the lobby glowed like champagne in a crystal bowl. The night clerk had a face as flat as a bookkeeper's ledger and eyes that flicked to the clock before they flicked to me. "Miss Vale's suite," I said. He hesitated, a professional reflex when trouble's about to step off the elevator. There's been, well, the police were called, sir. 9th floor." "Then they won't mind an extra witness." The elevator creaked up like it resented the effort. At the 9th floor, two bellhops whispered near the stairwell, and the scent of perfume and panic was thick enough to bottle. Suite 918's door was ajar. Celia Vale stood in the doorway, a tall, pale blonde with eyes the colour of sleeplessness. She wore a silver evening gown that looked too elegant for shock, but not enough to hide it. "You came," she said, like that alone was reason to breathe again. "I did. Mr. Wolfe sends his apologies, tied up in philosophy. I'm Archie Goodwin." She stepped aside. The suite was theatre perfect. Champagne bucket, 2 glasses, a record still spinning nothing on the phonograph. And Howard Kessler, the star of the evening, was stretched across the divan, his tuxedo open, his mouth frozen mid-surprise. The air smelled of almonds, not the bakery kind. "Who else was here?" I asked. "No one," she said quickly. Too quickly. "We were toasting the new play." He lifted his glass. She shuddered. I crouched near the body, keeping my prints off the glass. 2 champagne flutes on the table, one empty, one half full. One flute showed 2 lipstick touches on opposite rims. The other was clean. Wolfe's voice echoed in my head. "Observe before you conclude." "You can tell a lot about a hotel by the way the nightman folds a blanket," I muttered. "And this one had murder creased into the corners." "What?" she blinked. "Never mind. Who knew you'd be here tonight?" "Everyone," she said faintly. The cast, the investors, but Howard wanted privacy. We came here after the opening, which meant a whole chorus line of motives waiting outside the footlights. A knock interrupted us. When I opened the door, Pearlie Stebbins filled the frame, chewing on a cigar stub like it owed him money. "Well, I'll be Goodwin," he grunted. "Figures you'd sniff this out." "Evening, Pearlie. Glad to see the city keeps working while Wolfe naps." He pushed past me, gave Kessler a glance that would have flattened a less experienced corpse, and muttered, "Poison, huh? You touch anything?" "Not unless my fingerprints suddenly decided to freelance." He squatted beside the body, sniffed the glass. "Cyanide. Bet my pension on it. You can smell it." I noticed. Strong vintage. Stebbins eyed Celia Vale. "Lady, you his fiancée?" "Yes." "Then you're not going anywhere. Lieutenant Kramer's going to want a word come morning." Her face crumpled, but she nodded. I gave her what passed for comfort, which in my case meant keeping Stebbins distracted. "Pearlie," I said, "you got a better candidate? I mean, unless the champagne poured itself." "Don't start. You and Wolfe keep your distance from this one. Kramer's still got blisters from that opera case." "Sure," I said. "We'll stay miles away." I stayed long enough to give the maid my card and take a last look at the table. A scrap of lipstick on both rims of the same glass. That was new. Either Celia liked sharing, or someone had been too close for etiquette. Back on the street, I found a phone booth that smelled of yesterday's gossip and dialed the brownstone. Fritz answered, sleepy but polite. "Mr. Goodwin?" "Sorry to wake you, Fritz. Put the boss on, would you? Tell him it's life and death, mostly death." There was the rustle of slippers, then Wolfe's voice, slow and heavy as if each word had to pass customs. "Archie, you are calling at 1:20 in the morning. Explain." "I'm standing outside the Queen's Rest. Kessler's dead all right. Cyanide, no question. Lady swears innocence. Stebbins is already nesting. You have involved us." "Just me, technically, but the scene's a peach. 2 champagne glasses, both kissed. 1 corpse, 1 blonde, no witnesses." A pause. I could hear him inhale. "Did you touch the glass?" "Of course not. I have manners." "Pfui," then described the lipstick. That was Wolfe, a man who could diagnose murder from cosmetics. I told him. He grunted softly. 2 rims. Intimate but inconsistent. "You are certain?" "Positive." Then either they shared the glass, or someone impersonated intimacy. "That's poetry, sir. You should put it on a valentine." "Cease your drivel. Has the police detained you?" "Not yet. Stebbins thinks I'm harmless, which shows you how good I am." "Return home immediately. You will type a full report. I will read it with breakfast." "Yes, sir. Shall I bring the body?" "Archie!" His tone cracked like a whip. "Enough. Go home. Sleep." But beneath the thunder I caught something else, a shade of concern, maybe affection disguised as annoyance. I hung up smiling. By the time I reached the brownstone, the city was quiet enough to hear its own sins. The windows glowed faintly from Wolfe's study upstairs, but I didn't disturb him again. I wrote my notes, poured a glass of milk, the first of the week, strictly medicinal, and watched the dawn muscle its way down 35th Street. There was a corpse uptown, a woman with eyes like tragedy and lipstick like evidence, and Wolfe pretending not to be interested, which meant, by noon tomorrow, he'd be knee-deep in theatre gossip and cyanide chemistry, whether he liked it or not. When I finally turned off the lamp, the scent of almonds still clung to my coat. Some cases start with a gunshot. Others begin with a whisper through a telephone wire. This one began with velvet panic from the Queen's Rest Hotel, and before it was over, I knew that the only thing deadlier than poison in a champagne glass was the truth it was meant to hide. If I ever go missing, tell the police to start looking around Nero Wolfe's breakfast table, because that's where the man murders enthusiasm before noon. The next morning, I found him in his yellow silk robe, enthroned at the head of the mahogany table, spooning his poached eggs as if the fate of the world depended on the yolk not breaking. Fritz hovered like a Swiss saint at an altar, refilling the coffee pot and looking personally wounded by the morning headlines. The Gazette screamed from the front page, "The Queen's Rest death. Theatre producer found dead in luxury suite." Wolfe's thick fingers folded the paper precisely, his mouth tightening into a sneer that could have frightened the ink off the page. "The lubricity of journalists," he muttered, is exceeded only by their ignorance. A headline should declare truth, not conjecture. Sure, I said, buttering toast. But dead man found dead doesn't sell many papers. He lifted an eyebrow, the left one, the one that means he's considering whether conversation with me constitutes a moral failing. You were there, he said finally. You've had your fill of melodrama, no doubt. Must you compound it with levity at breakfast? Levity's cheaper than therapy, and since you wouldn't go last night, someone had to represent the firm. You might want to thank me, or at least not revoke my citizenship. He placed his fork down, neatly aligned with the knife, and leaned back. Archie, I warned you not to involve us. I forbade it. Yes, sir, you forbade, and I ignored. The city didn't implode. His eyes closed briefly, the universal gesture for I regret civilization. Report, he said. So I did. The hotel's marble corridors, the whispering bellhops, Celia Vale's trembling composure, the smell of almonds that clung like guilt, and Howard Kessler stretched across his divan with an expression that said, curtain calls were a thing of the past. Wolfe listened with half-lidded eyes, and the kind of silence that could audit a confession. When I reached the detail of the champagne glasses, one glass had lipstick twice, opposite rims. The other was clean, his lids opened a fraction. That's Wolfe for a double take. 2 rims? He asked. Yes, sir. Same shade, same smudge, like somebody forgot which side was theirs. He grunted softly. Amorous or duplicitous? Possibly both. Fritz made a sound halfway between a gasp and a prayer. Champagne, he said mournfully. Poisoned? Mon Dieu, such waste, I grinned. If poison had calories, Wolfe would have classified it as dessert. Archie, Wolfe's voice snapped like a ruler across knuckles, you will not jest about homicide at my table. Sure, I'll file my jokes under later. But you might want to know the lady sounded like a client waiting to happen. She said she'd call at noon. That stopped him. He didn't flinch, but his spoon paused mid-air. For Wolfe, that's the equivalent of a man jumping out a window. $5,000, he said slowly. A woman accused of murder offering a retainer that size must be either innocent or absurdly confident in her guilt. Or just rich enough to afford both options. He resumed eating methodically, as though digestion could help him think. After a long silence, he said, Describe her again. Tall, blonde, mid-30s, looks like the kind of actress who'd still be elegant even while drowning. Smart eyes, though, not your usual stage decoration. Scared, but not stupid. Did she lie? Not badly enough to notice. He gave a small snort. Your intuition is no substitute for verification. Still, he tapped his napkin thoughtfully against his chin. Poison is a woman's weapon. That vulgar generalization often proves true, yet its frequent truth makes it unreliable. I can tell her that when she calls. It'll cheer her right up. You will not. He reached for his beer glass, realized the hour, and withdrew his hand with a sigh. Confound the clock. I couldn't resist. Beer before breakfast would add a nice symmetry. Poison at midnight, hops at dawn, he glared. Fritz, remove this insolent puppy before I forget civilization. Fritz only smiled faintly, as if he'd seen this play too many times. If you gentlemen are finished quarrelling, shall I bring the Kaiser Schmarrn? Yes, Wolfe said. We may as well complete our degradation. When Fritz left, Wolfe turned to me again. Archie, this Miss Vale, she said she would call. At noon, which gives you 3 hours to pretend you're not curious. I am not curious. I am irritated. Sure, and I only drink milk on doctor's orders. He tugged at his ear, the tell that means I've won a minor skirmish. Did she mention her address? The Queen's Rest, same suite. She's probably locked in with police tape and Pearly Stebbins for company. Phooey, then we shall hear soon enough from Inspector Kramer. You want me to call him first? Certainly not. He will call when he believes he has outmanoeuvred me, which will amuse me briefly. Fritz reappeared with a silver tray. Your coffee, Mr. Goodwin. He poured with reverence. And for you, Mr. Wolfe, the preserves. Wolfe took a delicate spoonful of raspberry, as solemn as a priest performing a rite. Fritz, how often must I repeat myself about jam proportions? 1 spoon per egg, never 2. Fritz inclined his head. Yes, sir, though with such news in the paper, I thought perhaps— No, Wolfe interrupted. Catastrophe does not justify gluttony. We maintain order, not hysteria. Fritz retreated, chastened but not convinced. I leaned back. You know, if the police find Celia Vale guilty, your breakfast ritual might be the last calm moment you get for a while. Archie, you propose, as always, that I be moved to exertion. I decline. Murderers will continue killing whether I breakfast or not. True, but paying clients don't always wait for your digestion. That earned me a long, cool stare. You are insufferable, and yet occasionally useful. You said the envelope bore the Queen's Rest crest. I'll get you anything physical when Kramer releases it, I said. I grinned. So you are interested? He looked up sharply. I am observing. Interest implies expectation. Observation merely catalogues the follies of others. Catalogue all you want, but I'm betting you'll be lecturing her about it by lunchtime. He sighed, pushed back from the table and reached for the bell cord. Fritz, clear. I will go to the office. That was my cue to trail him. Wolfe's transition from dining room to office is never a stroll. It's a procession. He moved with the solemnity of a monarch returning to the throne. By the time he'd lowered himself into the yellow chair and adjusted the pillows behind him, the morning sunlight had turned the room gold. I perched at my desk and started typing notes from the night before. The click of keys filled the silence while he stared into nothing, fingers steepled. After 5 minutes, he said, Archie, you risked arrest. If Lieutenant Kramer had chosen to interpret your presence as obstruction, he didn't. He was too busy sniffing champagne. That may yet change. He paused. I tolerate your impetuosity because it sometimes yields opportunity. But if Miss Vale's sincerity is counterfeit, you'll fire me? I will withdraw from the case before it begins. I will not be used as an ornament in a stage play of deceit. Fair enough, but if she's honest? He sighed. Then we shall see. At that moment, the phone rang. I caught it before the second ring. Nero Wolfe's office. A woman's voice again, calm now but still brittle at the edges. Mr. Goodwin, it's Celia Vale. I spoke to you last night. Yes, Miss Vale. I glanced at Wolfe, who had closed his eyes, pretending disinterest but listening harder than a banker during audit. You're all right? The police released me. They believe I poisoned Howard. I didn't. I must see Mr. Wolfe. I cupped the receiver. She's on the line. Of course she is, he murmured, eyes still closed. Accept the appointment. I returned to the phone. Miss Vale, noon at the Brownstone, West 35th Street. Bring whatever papers you have, and Miss Vale, bring the truth too. He likes that even better than money. When I hung up, Wolfe opened his eyes. Archie, you are incorrigible. Maybe, but effective. He pulled the Gazette toward him again, flattening the page with both hands. Very well, he said with resignation that barely hid satisfaction. Fetch Miss Vale, if only to silence your exuberance. Exuberance is my business, I said. He grunted, already scanning the headlines again. Then may God help commerce. And with that, the office settled into the calm before the next storm, the kind that always begins with a client's perfume and ends with Wolfe's beer glass raised in reluctant triumph. When the doorbell rang at noon sharp, it had the crisp punctuation of a woman who'd decided timing was the last defense of dignity. I opened the door and met Celia Vale, 5'7" of stage discipline wrapped in a grey, tailored suit that had seen better spotlights. Her hair was that cool, champagne blonde that photographers loved and husbands regretted. She carried herself like applause might start any minute, though her eyes were more closing curtain than opening night. Miss Vale, I said, come in before Fritz mistakes you for the fishmonger. That earned me the faintest smile. Mr. Goodwin, I presume? The one and only. Mr. Wolfe is in the office. She stepped through the brownstone's threshold with the kind of grace that made the Persian rug look cheap. Fritz materialized in the doorway, silent but disapproving. Women who disrupted lunch plans were an affront to his calendar. I led her to Wolfe's office where the blinds were drawn halfway, slicing sunlight into gold ribbons across the bookshelves. Wolfe was seated in his yellow chair, looking like an emperor forced to receive envoys. He did not rise, of course. He rarely did for kings, much less clients. Miss Vale, he said, you have encountered us under regrettable circumstances. Mr. Wolfe, she replied, her voice low and trained, the kind that could turn a grocery list into Shakespeare. You know why I've come. I do not, he said, folding his hands across his middle. Mr. Goodwin has informed me of last night's events, but not of your purpose. Please state it. She took a breath. The police think I poisoned Howard Kessler. And did you? Wolfe asked. No. The word was soft, but it had the ring of truth, or rehearsal. He gestured toward the red chair opposite him. Sit. Begin at the beginning, Miss Vale. Spare me theatre embellishments. Truth is rarely improved by dramatization. If that rankled her, she hid it well. Howard and I went to the opening of The King's Masquerade. It was his production. Afterward, we returned to our suite at the Queen's Rest to celebrate privately. He opened a bottle of champagne. We drank. Both glasses, Wolfe interjected. Yes. She hesitated. At least I thought so. I took one sip. It was bitter, strange. I set it down. He laughed at me for being fastidious. Then he collapsed. Her eyes flickered once like a cue light failing mid-scene. Wolfe's lids lowered. No one else entered the suite? No one. We locked the door. The only key besides mine was Howard's. And yet, the police suspect you because of the fingerprints and an argument overheard. Yes, the bellboy heard us quarrel earlier that evening. Howard was drinking heavily and said, she faltered. Say it, Wolfe commanded, not unkindly. He said he was tired of being my benefactor. That drew a faint grunt from him. Ah, money. A motive the law enjoys because it requires no imagination. She clasped her gloved hands in her lap. The gloves were dove grey, like the suit, but one finger had a faint tear near the seam. I noticed. Wolfe probably already had catalogued the thread count. Miss Vale, I said. Did you and Kessler share that suite regularly? Her head turned toward me, graceful even in defensiveness. We were engaged, Mr. Goodwin. The hotel was his usual residence. Engaged long? 6 months. We announced it privately to friends, but he hesitated to make it public. Because? She hesitated too long. Because of Lorna Price. That name hung like a stage cue waiting for thunder. Wolfe opened his eyes fully now. The actress? Yes. She and Howard had past history. He was producing her next play. I didn't care for her company. I couldn't resist. Who would? I've seen her on magazine covers. She looks like she eats understudies for breakfast. That earned a small smile from Celia. You're not wrong. Wolfe cleared his throat. Miss Vale, the police have found no forced entry. They will assume opportunity equals guilt. If you wish me to assist, candour is obligatory. I understand. I have nothing to hide. Everyone has something to hide, he murmured. Mr. Goodwin, record this if you please. I opened my notebook, trying not to look too smug about the Mr. Goodwin part. Wolfe continued his questioning like a surgeon, deliberate, unhurried, precise. What time did you and Mr. Kessler return to the hotel? Shortly before 11. Who opened the champagne? He did. The lounge bartender sent it up earlier. Room service left it in the ice bucket. And the waiter's name? I don't remember. Describe him. Dark hair, about 40, foreign accent, possibly Italian. That will suffice. Wolfe leaned back. Now, you mentioned a quarrel. Did Mr. Kessler threaten to end the engagement? No. He said things, cruel things, but he always did when drinking. He would apologize the next morning. Did you have reason to fear him? Fear? She frowned. No, but I was growing tired. The theatre, the gossip, the endless scrutiny. Howard loved being watched. He didn't understand that I preferred shadows. She looked away then, eyes tracing the Venetian blinds. The sunlight painted bars across her cheekbones like the cell she might soon occupy. Wolfe studied her in silence for a long moment, then said, Miss Vale, you omitted something. You will tell me now. Her chin lifted. What do you mean? Your left wrist. She blinked, then pulled off her glove. The wrist was bare except for a faint pale line where jewellery had once rested. You wore a bracelet, Wolfe said. Blue stones, likely sapphires. Expensive, distinctive, recently removed. Her lips parted. How? You touched it repeatedly while speaking. Absence can be as eloquent as presence. She swallowed. It was a gift from Howard. I discovered this morning it's missing. I thought I'd lost it. Or it was taken, Wolfe said. Her eyes widened. By the police? Possibly. Or by the person who placed the poison in the champagne. That silenced the room for a beat too long. I broke it with a quip that came out sharper than intended. If she's rehearsing, it's a fine performance. She could have read the phone directory and made it sound like a confession. Her head snapped toward me, hurt flickering behind poise. Wolfe's tone chilled a degree. "Archie, you have the eye of a hawk and the charity of a hangman. Kindly moderate both." "Sure," I said. "But if I'm the hangman, you're the judge." "Precisely," he said. "And I will judge when I possess facts, not impressions." He turned to her again. "Miss Vale, this bracelet, did anyone besides you and Mr. Kessler know of its existence?" "Only Lorna Price. She admired it at a party last week." "Indeed. And envied it, I imagine?" Her voice cooled. "Lorna envied everything." Wolfe's eyes half closed again. "Archie, note, bracelet with blue stones, last seen on Miss Vale's wrist before 11 p.m, admired by Miss Price, now missing." "Got it," I said. "Miss Vale," Wolfe continued, "did you observe anything unusual in the suite before Mr. Kessler's collapse?" She hesitated. "The champagne tasted bitter, as I said, and there was a smell." "Almonds?" "Yes." "Classic cyanide," Wolfe murmured. "Yet, curiously, the glass from which you drank bears your lipstick. Twice." Her breath caught. "Twice?" "Yes, on opposite rims, suggesting the glass was turned, perhaps handled by another." "That's impossible, She stopped. Unless Howard took my glass by mistake." "Possible, or convenient," I said. Wolfe shot me a look that could have curdled milk. "Enough. Miss Vale, your candour does you credit. However, the police will not share my restraint. They will find your fingerprints and your quarrel persuasive." She drew herself up. "I told the truth. If that condemns me, so be it." That kind of statement sounds noble until you picture Sing Sing's concrete decor. I said, "You could help us help you by naming someone who might want Kessler dead." "Half of Broadway, Mr. Goodwin. He made enemies faster than box office hits." "Any of them specific enough to toast him with cyanide?" She hesitated. "Gil Danton, his stage manager. Howard accused him of stealing funds, but Gil adored him. He wouldn't—" "People kill those they adore every day," Wolfe said softly. "Affection breeds proximity. Proximity breeds opportunity." Her composure cracked just for an instant. "Then what do I do?" "Retain me," Wolfe said. "You already offered, I believe, a substantial sum." "I did." She opened her handbag and produced a cheque. 5,000, if you'll prove my innocence." He accepted it with a nod and placed it in his desk drawer. "I accept. You will remain available but silent. Do not grant interviews. Do not return to the Queen's Rest. You are now my client." She rose. "Thank you, Mr. Wolfe. You're the first man who hasn't looked at me like a headline." "That is because I dislike newspapers," he said dryly. "Mr. Goodwin will see you out." I escorted her to the door. When it closed behind her, I returned to find Wolfe staring at the space she'd occupied, as though the air itself had left evidence. "Well?" I asked. He rubbed a finger along his chin. "The woman is truthful but incomplete. Something gnaws at her memory." "Or her conscience." He ignored that. "The bracelet concerns me. The missing jewel often signifies the missing truth. Find it." "Sure," I said. "You want me to start with pawn shops or chorus girls?" He gave a slight nod. "Yes," I grinned. "You're welcome." He reached for the bell cord, signalling Fritz. "Coffee," he ordered. As Fritz appeared, Wolfe closed his eyes, retreating already into that great mental vault where murders are catalogued beside Latin aphorisms. The scent of roasted beans drifted through the office, chasing away the perfume Celia Vale had left behind, but not the image of her bare wrist. I looked at Wolfe. "So we're in?" He opened one eye. "We are ensnared, Archie. Do not confuse the two." And with that, he reached for his cup, ending the conference as neatly as cutting a scene to black. There are places in Manhattan that smell like ambition, fresh paint, powder, and perspiration. The backstage of the King's Masquerade was one of them. By 2 o'clock, the afternoon light from Broadway filtered through the stage door's glass panels like a weary ghost. The smell of dust and grease paint clung to the air. The orchestra pit was empty, but the hum of rehearsals still echoed in the boards like nerves in a body that couldn't stop twitching. I'd rung Saul Panzer on my way over. He was covering the alley in case the dramatics spilled outdoors. I eased past a pile of prop masks and a rack of costumes that could have clothed half of Monte Carlo, trying to look like I belonged. In show business, If you move like you're supposed to be there, people assume you're either the producer or the guy bringing champagne. Gil Danton spotted me first. A lean man with dark hair slicked back enough to blind an audience. He wore a rumpled stage manager's jacket that smelled faintly of cigarettes and resentment. His clipboard looked like it had survived 3 wars and a nervous breakdown. "Rehearsal's closed," he said, voice sharp as a stage cue. "I'm not here for an audition," I told him. "Theatre's not my line, unless it involves corpses, champagne, or checks that clear." He frowned. "You're the detective. Goodwin. Wolfe's man." "That's right. You know about Mr. Kessler's passing?" He gave a bitter laugh. "The city's gossip mills grind faster than our spotlight motors. Everyone knows. The old man dropped dead in his suite. Some say Celia Vale finally took her beau with arsenic in her gloves." "Do you?" Danton's eyes shifted toward the darkened stage, where dust motes floated like applause that never landed. "I think Celia loved him once. That's enough to make anybody dangerous." He scribbled something on his clipboard, a list of lighting cues, or maybe his conscience. They were poison for each other. She wanted marriage. He wanted Lorna. That name rang the kind of bell that makes headlines. Lorna Price, the actress? Yeah, the next big star in The King's Masquerade. Funny name for a show when the cast already wears masks off stage. That earned me half a smirk. "You detectives think everything's a metaphor." "I just think everyone's rehearsing something." He didn't answer. Instead, his eyes flicked toward the corridor leading to the dressing rooms, and that was all the warning I got before the door opened and Lorna Price made her entrance. Now, some women drift into a room. Lorna arrived like she was being announced by timpani. Mink coat draped over her shoulders, cigarette in a holder long enough to serve cocktails with, perfume thick enough to bill the front row. Her hair was golden, her smile weaponized, and her voice carried the kind of trained warmth that could melt a jury or a producer's wallet. "Gil," she purred, "why are we entertaining policemen? The curtain hasn't even gone up yet." "I'm not the police," I said, "just a taxpayer with curiosity and a license to ask rude questions." She appraised me the way critics read opening night reviews, looking for weakness, or maybe a reason to be amused. "Then make them interesting questions, darling," I bore easily. "I'll try to keep you awake. You knew Howard Kessler?" She exhaled smoke that curled like punctuation. "I worked for him, occasionally with him, depending on your definition of work." "Must have been a lively arrangement," she smiled faintly. "It was educational. He promised me the lead in his next production." "Which would have been The King's Masquerade?" "No, the next one," she said, tapping ash into a prop goblet. "A play called Cassandra Smiles. The part was Celia's, or would have been, until he changed his mind." That lined up with Danton's earlier jab, and I could almost hear Wolfe's voice reminding me, "Coincidence is the refuge of the intellectually lazy." "Changed his mind why?" I asked. "Because Celia Vale had become tedious. Audiences age her out the way producers do. She wanted commitment. He wanted novelty." "Meaning you?" "Meaning the future." Her tone was airy, but the corners of her mouth betrayed a tremor. He was tired of nostalgia. I didn't say so, but nostalgia had a nasty habit of leaving lipstick on champagne rims. Danton interrupted with a cough sharp enough to cut glass. "You don't have to tell him everything, Lorna." "Oh, relax, Gil," she said. "Mr. Goodwin's just the messenger boy. If Wolfe wants to know who killed Howard, he can buy a ticket." "Wolfe doesn't attend plays," I said. "He prefers acts that end before lunch." She laughed, low, rich, and slightly hollow. "Then I envy him." From the corner of my eye, I caught a movement at the back door. A short, solid man in a flat cap had taken up a position across the alley window, pretending to smoke. Saul Panzer, of course. He gave a small nod, the operative's Morse code for "I'm here if this gets ugly." Lorna noticed. "You brought help?" "Just a friend. He collects autographs from people who lie to me." "I never lie," she said, adjusting her mink collar. "I improvise." "Then improvise this," I said, holding up a playbill from the dressing table. "Whose handwriting is this?" She leaned in, eyes flicking to the scrawled line at the bottom. "After curtain, QRH suite." Her expression froze a fraction too long. "Where did you find that?" "Under the bouquet on Kessler's dressing table." She turned to Danton. "You told me it was destroyed." He stiffened. "I didn't write it." Then who did? I asked. Maybe Celia, Lorna said quickly. She was jealous. She came here before the show one night, made a scene. Maybe she left that. It was a tidy red herring, maybe too tidy. I pocketed the playbill. If she did, she writes like a man. Most actresses do, she said coolly. It's survival. That was when the stage phone buzzed on the wall, the harsh electric rings slicing through the perfume fog. Danton picked up, listened, and said, "Goodwin, for you." I raised an eyebrow. Only one man in Manhattan could track me down mid-interrogation without the operator's help. Wolfe's voice came through the line, deep and resonant as a church bell. "Archie?" "Right here, sir. I remind you of a principle. We do not consort with actresses. They are purveyors of illusion, dangerous to reason." "She's in mink, not grease paint," I said. "So far she's just purveying attitude." "Leave at once," he ordered. "Your time is better spent among facts than fancies." "Sure, but if I left every time a fancy crossed my path, you'd be solving murders alone." A pause. Then, in that low register that means he's both exasperated and faintly amused, "Archie, you are impervious to instruction. Do not exceed the bounds of gallantry." "I'll keep both hands visible," I said, and hung up before he could revoke my salary. Lorna was watching me with feline interest. "Papa Wolfe checking up?" "He's particular about my social life." "Then tell him I approve." I grinned. "That's exactly the problem." Danton clattered down the narrow aisle toward the stage, muttering, "Rehearsal in 10, Lorna. Put your claws away." She ignored him and turned her back to the mirror, touching up lipstick that didn't need it. "You think Celia killed him?" "I think everyone's auditioning for innocence," I said. "You're all hitting your marks, but the script's lousy." "Then rewrite it, Mr. Goodwin." "I might," I said, "starting with this playbill." She reached out, hand light on my sleeve. "Don't waste your time. Howard was a cruel man. Men like that make their own enemies." "That's true," I said, "but the ones who die of cyanide usually get help." She let go and turned away. "If you're quite done playing detective, I have to become someone else for a living." "Join the club," I said. Outside, the alley smelled of rain that hadn't happened yet. Saul Pantzer fell into step beside me. "Well?" he asked. "Lorna's a cool customer, too cool. She knew about the note before I showed it." "Want me to tail her?" "Not yet. Stick to the stage door. See who visits her after dark." He nodded once and faded back into shadow. If the theatre crowd noticed him, they deserved whatever headline followed. I headed toward the corner phone booth to call Wolfe back. The afternoon traffic hummed like a restless audience. When he answered, I gave him the short version. Danton's bitterness, Lorna's vanity, and the playbill note. He grunted. A scribbled rendezvous. QRH, the Queen's Rest Hotel, naturally. But whose hand wrote it? "Hard to tell," I said. "Looks masculine." "Bring it to me at once. And Archie?" "Yes, sir." "Burn no bridges, but avoid flirtations that could scorch your eyebrows." I hung up smiling. Wolfe's concern always sounded like condemnation. By the time I reached the cab stand, the marquee of the King's Masquerade blazed above me in electric confidence. I looked back once at the alley where Saul's shadow lingered, and thought about Celia Vale's trembling hands, Lorna Price's glittering poise, and a dead man who'd collected women like first editions. The only thing deadlier than a bad review is a jealous understudy, and I had a hunch this show was heading for a closing night nobody planned. The doorbell rang at 6:47 p.m., a minute too early for dinner, and far too early for good news. Fritz appeared at the office doorway, immaculate as ever, but frowning in the international language of cop at the door. "Inspector Kramer, Mr. Wolfe," he announced, with the same tone he'd use for an invasion. Wolfe sighed, one of those deep operatic sighs that could have registered on a seismograph. "Show him in," he said. "And Fritz, a third beer. The inspector looks as though he will need it, and I shall require moral reinforcement." Kramer entered without waiting to be shown. He looked older than usual, or maybe just tired. Trench coat unbuttoned, cigar chewed down to a tragic stub, eyes red from too much paperwork and not enough patience. He didn't bother with pleasantries. "Wolfe," he said, "I'm not here for the beer." I shut the door behind him. "Then I'll drink yours," I offered. He shot me a look that could have curdled milk. "Don't tempt me, Goodwin. I'm in no mood." "That's because you skipped the beer," I said. "Fritz is fixing that." Wolfe gestured toward the red chair with a lazy motion. Sit, Inspector. It's always easier to quarrel when seated. Kramer dropped into the chair, exhaling like a man deflating. You're harboring Celia Vale. I am not. Wolfe folded his hands on the desk, precise as an accountant balancing books. The lady departed this house nearly 3 hours ago. She came as a client, not a fugitive. She's a suspect, Kramer said. She is also a citizen, Wolfe replied, and until your warrant dictates otherwise, I may converse with whomever I please. Kramer grunted, lit another cigar, and puffed like a locomotive running out of tracks. You're skating on procedure, Wolfe. If you're obstructing, I obstruct nothing. You, however, trespass on my digestion. Archie, what time is dinner? 8 sharp, I said, assuming you survived the interrogation. Kramer ignored me, which was probably wise. We've got new information. The lab confirmed cyanide in Kessler's champagne. Straight, no chaser. And the hotel bartender, the one who served them, has vanished. Packed his bag, disappeared overnight. Name's Carlo Vecchi. Wolfe frowned slightly. A convenient absence. Too convenient, Kramer said. And if I find out you or your men are hiding him— Phooey, Wolfe interrupted, waving a hand. I am not in the business of concealing Italians. Fritz is sufficient. Thank you, sir, came Fritz's polite voice from the doorway as he entered with the tray. He placed the beer carefully beside Wolfe, then one before Kramer, and withdrew with silent disapproval at the invasion of mealtime territory. Kramer picked up the glass but didn't drink. You think this is funny, Wolfe? Nothing involving cyanide is amusing, Wolfe said, but melodrama rarely improves inquiry. Do sit back, man, and state your grievance without posturing. Kramer did sit back, but the posture remained. All right, you've got Miss Vale walking free. The press is sniffing around. The Gazette says Wolfe's star witness may be guilty as sin. I'm getting heat from the DA and I've got reporters camped on my steps. If you're running your own investigation, you'd better clear it through me, or I'll have your license yanked before breakfast. That got Wolfe's attention, and mine. His eyes opened a notch wider. My license as employer of private investigators is granted by the state, he said slowly. You may recommend its revocation, but not command it. Do not threaten me with weapons you cannot wield. Kramer took a long pull of the beer after all, then set the glass down with a thunk. I can make your life miserable, Wolfe, and I will if you get in my way. Your persistence, Wolfe said, is exceeded only by your misconception. I have no wish to hinder you. Our purposes are aligned, to determine who poisoned Howard Kessler. Aligned, sure, but you do it for $5,000, I do it for a salary. Your labour is underappreciated, Wolfe murmured, and underpaid. I coughed into my hand to hide the grin. Kramer treats rules like I treat diets, optional when inconvenient. He glared at me again. And you treat homicide scenes like dance floors, Goodwin. You were at the Queen's Rest without authorization. Not true, I said. The lady called for help and I answered the phone. You can check the logs. I did, he said. You got there before Stebbins. You took notes. Sure, I'm fast on my feet. Too fast. Wolfe's voice came across like velvet over steel. Inspector, you may reprimand me, not my assistant. He acts under my direction. That startled both of us. Wolfe doesn't usually extend his protective wing in public. Kramer snorted. Your direction, huh? Then you admit you're running a parallel case. I admit, Wolfe said, to employing reason. You should try it. That got us a full 10 seconds of silence. Rare air for that room. The ticking of the wall clock filled it until Kramer ground out his cigar in the ashtray. All right, he said finally. You want reason? Here's reason. At 12:40 a.m., after Kessler was already dead, somebody signed his name on a bar tab at the Queen's Rest Lounge. HK. Same flourish, same signature as his hotel register. I've got the original. Want to tell me how a dead man buys brandy? That was new. Wolfe's brows rose. A falsified signature implies intent to mislead. You're certain it's genuine imitation. Our handwriting man says it's perfect. Ink matches the bar ledger, timing fits. We think the bartender forged it, maybe to confuse the timeline before he skipped town. Or to protect someone else, Wolfe said softly. Kramer leaned forward. You know something. Only that the bartender's disappearance is as interesting as his forgery. If you find him, you may also find your poisoner. Kramer grunted. That's what I figured, You could help by telling me where to look. I could, Wolfe said, but you wouldn't believe me. That earned another silence. Kramer stood, tugging his coat straight. You're skating thin ice, Wolfe. I'm telling you, if you sit on evidence, I'll have a warrant on your desk by morning. Then we must hope, Wolfe said, that my desk remains unencumbered. Archie will, of course, cooperate with your men. I didn't get a vote, but I nodded anyway. Kramer reached for his hat, but lingered. One thing. You really think Celia Vale's innocent? Wolfe looked up at him. I think she is no fool, and a fool seldom poisons with success. Meaning what? Meaning, Wolfe said, that if she had done it, you would not be here speculating. Kramer almost smiled. Almost. You're a piece of work, Wolfe. One of these days your arrogance will bury you. Possibly, Wolfe said, but not before dinner. That ended it. Kramer turned toward the door, muttering something about warrants and ulcers. At the threshold he stopped, looked back and said gruffly, All right, Wolfe, I'll wait for your report. But make it fast, the city's watching this one. When the door shut behind him, Wolfe leaned back, half closing his eyes. The evening light cut through the Venetian blinds in narrow stripes across his face. I said, Well, that was pleasant. You didn't even shout once. He is fatigued, Wolfe said. So am I. The weight of officialdom crushes inquiry. Sure, and the bartender? You think he forged that signature? Perhaps, but perhaps not. A forgery requires skill. A bartender requires motive. So does a killer. Indeed. He reached for his beer, took a sip, and exhaled through his nose. Archie, note this. A dead man's signature implies a living conspirator. I'll underline it in red. You want me to find Vecchi? Not tonight, he said. It is after 6. Theodore will be tending the orchids. The police will blunder in the dark a few hours longer. Let them. I grinned. You're letting Kramer get a head start? He deserves it, Wolfe said. He carries the burden of procedure. We carry the burden of thought. Each has his punishment. He drained the glass and set it down with a soft clink. Dinner at 8, he murmured. Until then, tranquility. Archie, no telephone calls. Not even from blondes in distress? Especially not from them. That closed the conversation. He leaned back, eyes half shut, already retreating inward to wherever his mind brewed its secret sources. The office was quiet except for the faint hum of traffic beyond the shutters and the ticking of the clock. I looked at the empty chair where Kramer had sat and thought about the missing bartender, the fake signature, and Wolfe's calm smile when accused of obstruction. If Wolfe was right, and he usually was, that forged bar tab wasn't a sideshow, it was the main act. And somewhere between the Queen's Rest and our front door, somebody was rewriting the script. I flicked off the desk lamp and headed toward the kitchen, because if the law was closing in, I figured I'd better grab dinner before Wolfe's tranquility came to an end. By 10:15 the next morning, Wolfe was upstairs in the plant rooms communing with orchids, which meant the world could collapse as long as it didn't trample the cypripediums. The phone rang at 10:17, one ring short of blasphemy, and I snatched it before Fritz could shudder his way up the stairs. Goodwin, said the voice, soft as a cat's tread. Saul Panzer. You're early, I told him. Wolfe won't speak before 11 unless the house is on fire or the beer's flat. This might count, he said. Remember the bracelet Celia Vale mentioned? Blue stones, fancy clasp. Sure, Wolfe called it a trinket of interest, which means he'd give a lecture on metallurgy if provoked. Well, I found it. Pawn shop on 44th near Times Square. Ticket made out to Lorna Price. That put a fresh kink in the case. The late producer's ex-muse, you sure? I don't guess about names, Archie. The clerk's skittish. Thought I was a reporter until I flashed a badge that isn't mine. You want in on this? Try to stop me, I said. By the time I reached the brownstone garage, the Heron coupe looked like it had been waiting to stretch its legs. I left a note on Wolfe's desk. Gone fishing for bracelets. Then I hit Midtown. Times Square before noon smells like last night's confetti trying to remember what it celebrated. The pawn shop sat between a newsstand and a lunch counter, its window display a museum of second-hand ambition, old saxophones, chipped cufflinks, watches that never told the same time twice. Inside, the air had the damp tang of metal and sweat. Saul was already there, leaning against a counter with his cap pulled low, the kind of posture that said he could wait forever, and never blink. "Morning, Archie," he murmured without looking up. "Clark's in the back. Calls himself Lou." I took in the decor, dusty shelves, a single bulb fighting for life, and a register that probably hadn't rung honestly since Roosevelt's first term. A bell jingled and Lou appeared, wiping his hands on a grey rag that matched his complexion. He had a face like a used coin, smooth in spots, rubbed out in others. "You boys again," he grunted. "I told the other fella everything." "Which other fella?" I asked. He hesitated. "Police," I smiled. "You'll have to narrow it down. There's a whole flock of them. Look, I don't want trouble. The lady came in 2 days ago, pawned the bracelet, said she'd redeem it next week. Paid cash, no haggling." "Lady?" I asked, though I already knew. He nodded. "Tall, blonde, fur collar. Looked like money, talked like it too. Name she gave, Lorna Price." "Did she show identification?" Saul asked quietly. Lou's eyes darted between us. "She said she was in a hurry. I wrote what she told me." Saul reached into his jacket and pulled a slim leather case, flipping it open just enough to flash something metallic. "We're verifying property in an active investigation. Cooperate, and you won't regret it." Lou's Adam's apple bobbed like a yo-yo. "What do you want?" "The bracelet," Saul said. Lou disappeared into the back. I leaned closer to Saul. "Credentials that don't exist, huh? What department do you represent today?" He didn't even blink. "Metropolitan Bureau of Persuasion." "Saul," I said, "your poker face could make a sphinx blush." He allowed the smallest grin, half a flicker, like a sunrise deciding against it. Lou came back carrying a velvet pouch. He set it on the counter like it might explode. "There, appraised at 500. You're sure this is official business?" "Official enough," I said, and tipped the pouch over. The bracelet slid out with a whisper of links, silver filigree studded with blue stones that caught the light and flung it back like they were insulted. It wasn't cheap or innocent. Saul studied it, gloved hands steady. "Mind if we take a closer look?" Lou shrugged. "Long as it comes back. I don't want cops accusing me of fencing stolen property." "That depends on whether it was stolen," I said. He turned pale enough to blend with the dust. "I didn't know. Look, the lady said it was a break-up gift. I don't check romance credentials." Saul gave me a glance. Translation: "You handle him." "Relax, Lou," I said. "We're not here to revoke your license to Hock Heartbreak. Just one thing. Where'd she keep it before handing it over?" "In a small satin box, like jewelry stores use. I tossed it after." "Find it." He blinked. "It's in the trash." "Then untrash it." 5 minutes later, he produced the box. The lid had a faint, sticky patch inside, dark brown and hardened. I rubbed it with a fingertip and sniffed. Resin, the theatrical kind used for sealing props and fixing costume jewelry. "Interesting," I said. "You use this on instruments?" Lou shook his head. "No, looks like stage glue." Saul pocketed a note on it. "We'll take the bracelet to verify against an insurance report. Receipt?" Lou scribbled one fast enough to break a sweat. As we left, I said, "You think he's telling the truth?" Saul shrugged. "Truth enough for now." The street was thick with lunch-hour traffic. A line of chorus girls in rehearsal coats passed, laughing, their perfume competing with the hot dog stand's onions. Showbiz, all glitter until you turned it over and saw the pawn ticket. We dropped the bracelet at a photo lab on 39th for close-up shots, Wolfe's orders in absentia, and grabbed a corner booth at the automat. Saul's coffee steamed while I worked through a sandwich that had never met a chicken. "So," I said, "our leading lady pawned the dead man's gift 2 days before he drank cyanide. That timing sound like coincidence to you?" "Coincidences make detectives lazy," Saul said. "Sure, but they also make good alibis." He didn't answer. That was Saul. Words only when they paid rent. By 2 o'clock we were back at the brownstone. The office smelled faintly of polish and Fritz's idea of civilization, lamb consommé simmering somewhere beyond the door. Wolfe was in his chair, hands folded, eyes closed, the portrait of patience interrupted. "Report," he said without opening them. I dropped the velvet pouch on his desk. Bracelet located. Pawned by Lorna Price 2 days before Kessler's curtain call. Shop clerk confirmed the name. Now his eyes opened. Describe the bracelet. Silver filigree, blue stones, worth more than my yearly allowance, And it came with a bonus, a smudge of dried resin inside the case, stage adhesive according to Lou the pawnbroker. He sat up, the movement almost imperceptible but heavy with thought. Resin? Yep, the sticky kind actors use for props or costumes. Maybe it held a fake jewel, or a real clue. Pfui, he muttered, but without conviction. Archie, show me the smudge. I passed the small satin box across. Wolfe tilted it under the lamplight, examining the hardened fleck through his magnifier. Resin mixed with dust from fabric fibres, he said. Coarse weave, muslin perhaps, typical of stage curtains or costumes. So, it ties back to the theatre, I said. Specifically the King's Masquerade. Indeed, Miss Price's play. Saul, still standing near the door, added, You think she used the bracelet to transport poison? Wolfe frowned. Unlikely. Resin implies adhesion, not concealment. Yet, it is not irrelevant. I will need a sample from the stage materials at the theatre. I'll arrange it, Saul said. No, Wolfe countered. Mr. Goodwin will go. You will maintain observation elsewhere. The police may yet stumble on that pawn ticket. I groaned. You realize Kramer's due any minute with a warrant-shaped headache. I'll be lucky to get past him. Wolfe waved a hand. You will charm him. You excel at the unwise. Saul's mouth twitched again, his version of applause. I'll tail Miss Price. Maybe she tries to redeem her jewellery. Excellent, Wolfe said, but discreetly, Saul. The woman is practised in deception. After Saul left, Wolfe turned to me. Archie, you will type a memorandum detailing the discovery, including the resin. Emphasize chronology. The bracelet pawned before Kessler's death. It is crucial. Sure, I said, heading for my desk. I'll even use the big typewriter, the one that spells words correctly. He ignored that. This trinket may yet prove Miss Price's undoing. Or Celia's salvation. Perhaps both, he said, eyes closing again. In either case, it merits study. Accept my commendation, Archie. Briefly. I turned in my chair. You mean that? I rarely jest about competence. Prolong the moment if you wish, but not aloud. Noted, I said. I'll frame it between lunch and eternity. He grunted, which in Wolfian dialect translates roughly to affection acknowledged. Conversation terminated. I started typing. Outside, traffic hummed its New York lullaby. Inside, the bracelet glimmered under Wolfe's lamp, catching reflections of the orchids beyond the window. Glitter and grime, beauty and deceit, bound together by a thin smear of resin and a corpse that refused to stay quiet. You can tell when a city's holding its breath. The sound changes. Cabs move slower, horns stay holstered, and the night air thickens like it knows bad news before the papers do. That was Manhattan at 10 past midnight when the bulletin hit. Lorna Price found dead in her apartment. Apparent gas leak. I was halfway through a cup of coffee at the corner diner when the newsboy burst in, hollering, "Actress found dead!" loud enough to make the eggs curdle. I didn't need to see the name twice. Lorna Price. The mink, the perfume, the arrogance in high heels. Dead women don't pawn bracelets, and gas doesn't leak that neatly. I dropped 2 quarters, left the coffee steaming, and hit the phone booth. The line at the brownstone rang twice before Wolfe's baritone arrived, slow as molasses and twice as heavy. Archie? Yeah. Lorna Price just made page 1 without even waiting for the presses. Gas leak, they say. Silence for 5 seconds, then, suicide? That's Kramer's headline, but I call it curtain call. He exhaled. Phooey. Gas rarely kills the innocent by accident. You will confirm. Already moving. Proceed methodically, he ordered, but with haste. Yes, sir. Anything else? Yes. Do not. I hung up before he could tell me not to get killed. The apartment was on West 56th, top floor of a brownstone that smelled of money trying to hide mildew. A half circle of patrol cars blocked the street. I flashed my license and a friendly grin at the uniform out front, both equally forged by habit. Press? He asked. Private investigation attached to Wolfe's office, I said. We consult. He eyed me like I'd claimed kinship with the mayor but stepped aside. They're wrapping up. You won't like the smell. He was right. The air in the hall had that sweet, choking tang of gas mixed with stale perfume. Tragedy's aftershave. Inside, the rooms glowed dim under streetlight spill. Lorna's body was stretched across the chaise, pale and perfect, except for the blue tinge that didn't belong on skin. A window stood half open. On the table beside her lay a brandy glass, half full. Lieutenant Pearlie Stebbins looked up from the scene, eyes tired, coat collar up. "Goodwin," he said, low and flat. "I should have guessed." "Your hospitality always warms me," I said. "Don't start, it's suicide. Gas jet open, door locked from inside, no signs of struggle." "Yeah, the universe sure likes its clean endings," he grunted. "Kramer already went home. He told me to tell you to keep your nose out." "Tell him I tried," I said, and crouched by the table. "Any note?" "Nothing but that glass. Fingerprints match hers. Gas bill overdue. Motive? Despair. Simple." "Simple murders are the most expensive kind," I said. "Where's her purse?" He pointed to a chair. I checked it, neat as a stage prop. Compact, wallet, keys, and a pawn ticket for one silver bracelet with blue stones. So much for suicide. By 2:30 I'd canvassed the neighborhood. The janitor, a tall Pole with eyes like basement coal, swore he'd seen Gil Danton, the stage manager, arguing with Lorna earlier that evening. "They fought, yes," he said, nervously twisting his cap. "Around 11, then he leave fast." "Sure it was him?" He nodded. "He dropped something. I keep." He fished in his pocket and handed me a wristwatch. Cracked glass, stopped at 11:40. I palmed it, thanked him, and slipped him a bill. "You didn't see me." "I see nobody," he said, disappearing down the stairwell. I called Kramer from a corner drugstore. He answered on the second ring, voice sandpapered from too many cigars. "Goodwin, what the devil are you doing?" "Field trip. Lorna Price didn't die of depression. She died of narrative convenience. Danton was here." He snorted. "You've been reading too many scripts. We checked Danton. Alibi solid. Left the theatre at midnight, home by 12:15. "His watch stopped at 11:40, I said. "In her hallway." That got silence. Then, "You got proof it's his?" "Inscribed, to G.D. for opening night triumphs, H.K. Howard Kessler's gift." A growl came over the line. "You're sure?" "Positive, and he didn't lose it rehearsing." Kramer exhaled smoke through the phone. "All right, I'll look into it. But don't run your own morgue, Goodwin. We've got a system." "Sure you do," I said. "It just runs on glue instead of gears." He hung up before I could rate that one. By 3 a.m., the city had folded in on itself. Nightclubs closing, newsstands bundling papers, the streets slick with drizzle that wasn't quite rain. I made the rounds Wolfe had drilled into me. Cab stands, alleys, gossip bars. A cabbie remembered a theatre dame hopping out near 56th at 11:20 with a man he thought was Danton. They were jawing about something hot, he said, like lovers or lawsuits. Another lead came from a chorus girl nursing gin at the Flamingo Bar. She said Lorna had been scared, thought someone was watching her. She said she'd been framed once and she wouldn't play that part again. By then I'd had enough witnesses to fill a jury box, but not one who'd seen the crime. That's the city's trick. A million eyes and none of them looking the right way. The last stop was a news vendor dozing under a canopy. He yawned when I mentioned Lorna. "Yeah, I seen her. Came by about 11. Bought a Gazette. Said she was going to call someone, then changed her mind. Looked spooked." "What time again?" 11:30, maybe. The puzzle pieces were starting to make noise in my head, and I didn't like the tune. It was close to 4 when I dragged myself back to the brownstone. My coat smelled like wet pavement and cheap coffee. Fritz met me at the door, disapproving from head to slippers. "Mr. Wolfe is awake," he said. "He has not retired." "Wonderful," I muttered. "Then I don't have to feel guilty about waking him." The office was warm, lamplight low, Wolfe in his chair with a book unopened on his lap. His eyes tracked me like a hawk sizing up a pigeon. "You reek of exertion," he said. "Consider it fieldwork perfume," I said, dropping into the red chair. "You heard?" "I have heard sufficient rumours. State facts." "Lorna Price, dead by gas. Officially suicide, unofficially baloney. I've got witnesses. Danton was seen at her building near 11. Janitor found his watch, stopped at 11:40. Cabby dropped them off together. She bought a paper at 11:30. She was alive after he said he left." He nodded once, slow. "And the bracelet?" "Pawn ticket in her purse. The same one she hocked for Kessler's Bluestone special. The motive chain's tightening." "Pfui," he said softly. "Not motive. Opportunity. She may have been silenced to protect the illusion of guilt." Meaning Celia Vale, I said. Precisely. He leaned forward, fingertips pressed. Our actress pawned the bracelet under duress to create a false trail. When she realized it, she threatened exposure. The assassin silenced her. Gas provides theatre, tragedy, not crime. Then we're looking at someone who writes their murders in acts. Yes, and rewrites them when the critics complain. I couldn't help it. I grinned despite the hour. In theatre or murder, timing is everything. He opened one eye. Your levity is appalling. So's my circulation at this hour. You should try working nights sometime. He made a sound halfway between a grunt and a sigh. You have done well, Archie. Say that again, slow. I'll get Fritz to embroider it on a pillow. Imbecile, but a useful one, he muttered. That, from Wolfe, was a valentine. He rang the bell cord. Fritz appeared as if summoned from a mist. Coffee, Fritz. Black. Our Mr. Goodwin has returned from his nocturnal debauch with information of substance. Yes, sir, Fritz said, though his eyebrows condemned me. While the tray arrived, Wolfe began jotting notes on yellow pads. Arrows, names, and one word circled twice. Timing. When the coffee came, he waved the cup toward me. Later this morning, we'll get Kramer in for a discussion. You will prepare transcripts of your statements and those of the witnesses. Concision, Archie. Concision, I repeated. Right. I'll cut out all the jokes. Try not to embellish, he said dryly. The truth suffices, sometimes. I was too tired to argue. I finished the coffee, typed 2 pages of notes for the morning, and set my watch beside Danton's broken one on Wolfe's desk. 2 timepieces, both stopped before midnight. Wolfe, I said, standing, what if Kramer's right? What if Lorna did kill herself? He closed his eyes, voice low. Then Archie, the city has lost another actress, but I do not believe in coincidences that tidy. The same mind wrote both deaths, and it is not finished yet. Meaning there's an encore coming? He opened one eye. Meaning, my dear Archie, the show must go on. I left him there under the lamplight, heavy and still, a general drafting battle plans at dawn. Outside, the sky was the colour of unpolished silver, and somewhere uptown a milk truck rattled like a drum roll for Act 3. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, the brownstone was a theatre without an audience, velvet shadows, a faint trace of dinner from Fritz's kitchen, and the main act in full command of his stage. Wolfe sat behind his desk, brow creased, fingers tented under the lamplight like he was holding invisible strings that made the world dance. You could tell he was deep in the plot because the office clock had ticked through dessert, and he hadn't mentioned orchids once. The silence had that charged flavour it gets before he starts dictating, and when Wolfe dictates, somewhere in Manhattan a guilty conscience starts sweating. He looked up. Archie. Yes, maestro. Spare me the burlesque, he said evenly. We have a misdirected narrative to repair. I dislike incompetently written tragedies. When Wolfe starts talking like a theatre critic, I said, pulling the notebook toward me, someone's about to lose their dignity. He ignored that. First, the artifacts, the bracelet, the pawn ticket, and Kessler's bar tab. All props from Act 1, I said. I'm guessing you've decided the killer's script needs a rewrite. Needs annihilation, he corrected. Our murderer conceived a play of deceit poorly staged. The poison intended for one performer reached another. Kessler was not the target. That one hung in the air like a bad note on a violin. Then who was? He didn't answer immediately, which in Wolfean means I'll tell you when it pleases me. Instead, he reached for the small glass dish holding the flake of resin from the bracelet box. Observe, he said. Stage adhesive. A compound of resin and linseed used to affix false jewels. This was applied to the clasp of the bluestone bracelet, deliberately. So our killer moonlights as a prop man. Perhaps. More likely someone familiar with theatrical illusion. His voice softened, almost indulgent. We return always to that accursed theatre. Murder, Archie, is frequently a form of performance, though the critics tend to be unforgiving. Yeah, I said. They usually hand down the death sentence in one act. The phone rang then, slicing through the philosophical fog. I picked it up. Nero Wolfe's residence, Goodwin speaking. Get him, came Kramer's voice, dull, the sound of a man grinding his teeth on a cigar. I covered the receiver. It's Kramer. He sounds like he's been sleeping on gravel. Wolfe gestured. Indulge him. I put the line through. Inspector. Cut the charm, Goodwin. I've been through 100 pages of lab reports and interviews, and nothing fits. You hear me? Nothing. The cyanide was in Kessler's champagne, but the bartender vanished. The pawn shop owners clammed up. Now I've got the press printing that you two are running your own case out of that fancy library you call an office. Careful, Inspector, I said. We charge extra for publicity. Put Wolfe on. Wolfe took the receiver like it was contaminated. Inspector. I'll be brief, Kramer said. If you've got something, I need it now. Otherwise I'm closing the file on Celia Vale and calling it suicide and panic. Pfui, Wolfe said. If you close this case, you will commit an act of intellectual vandalism. Miss Vale is not guilty and you know it. Knowing and proving are different things, Kramer shot back. You've got conjecture, I've got evidence. You have fragments, Wolfe said calmly. The bar tab, for instance, signed HK after Kessler's death. Either your bartender served spirits to the deceased or someone forged it. Kramer hesitated. You can prove that? I will, Wolfe said. But for that, I require the indulgence of patience and the cooperation of your department. Meaning what? Meaning, Wolfe said, that I intend to summon the theatre's investors and associates here tomorrow for consultation. If the killer is among them, I propose to let him rewrite his confession in my presence. Another stunt, Kramer grumbled. You'll have a DA on my neck. So be it, Wolfe said and hung up. He turned back to me unruffled. Archie, take dictation. That tone, clipped, measured, imperial, meant no interruptions, though I was already rolling the paper into the typewriter. To Messrs. Holbrook, Danton and Marwick, principal investors of the King's Masquerade, he began. Gentlemen, circumstances of grave import require your attendance at my office tomorrow at 3 p.m. for consultation on a matter concerning the late Mr. Kessler. I assure you your interests and reputations will benefit from frank cooperation. He paused, eyes half-lidded. Sign each individually, mail tonight by courier. I typed it out, sealing 3 envelopes while he drafted a 4th note addressed to Celia Vale, requesting her presence for clarification. When Wolfe gets poetic, he's about to draw blood. As I stacked the envelopes, he leaned back and closed his eyes. Our murderer's miscalculation was elementary. He wrote a play for 2 acts, and reality insisted on a 3rd. Then Lorna Price was the rewrite, I said. Indeed. She knew the bracelet's secret, that it carried traces of adhesive from a poisoned prop. The killer panicked. A woman who trades her jewelry for silence does not live long. That was Wolfe's way of saying Lorna had been silenced for being inconveniently observant. I lit a cigarette. So, the poison wasn't meant for Kessler, but for whom? For Miss Vale, he said without hesitation. Consider the evidence. She dined with him, shared his glass, and the lipstick marks suggest the flute passed between them. The assassin intended her death, not his. I blinked. You're saying someone tried to kill her, missed, and then spent 2 days cleaning up the mess by murdering a second woman? He opened one eye. Crude, yes, but theatre has always tolerated overacting. Then who had reason to want Celia dead? Anyone who stood to gain from her removal, emotionally or financially. Kessler's engagement to her endangered another alliance, perhaps within the production. Our Mr. Danton, for example, has an excess of vanity and a deficit of income. Plus a broken watch, I said. Precisely. A watch stopped at 11:40, the hour Miss Price died. His alibi collapses under its own melodrama. I let that sit while the office clock ticked. The lamplight made Wolfe's face look carved in amber, solemn and immovable. You think Danton poisoned Kessler and killed Price? I think, Wolfe said slowly, that Danton played stage manager to both deaths, but whether he wielded the weapon or merely cued the act remains uncertain. Tomorrow we shall know. Fritz appeared at the doorway then, silver tray in hand. Gentlemen, he said, coffee and beer. Wolfe gestured, gracious again now that the battle map was drawn. Thank you, Fritz. I took my cup while Wolfe lifted his glass of beer like it was part of a ritual older than civilization. He sipped, then said, Archie, you will send those letters tonight. Telephone Saul Panzer. He will ensure delivery discreetly. Then you may file your notes. Saul again? He's clocking overtime. He is indispensable, Wolfe said, as on occasion are you. That was practically a sonnet in wolf speak. I smirked. You're mellow tonight. Must be the scent of victory. He frowned. Do not preen. We are not yet finished. Then I'll stay modest, I said. But if you're right, the curtain drops tomorrow. On someone's dignity, yes. As I slid the envelopes into my coat, the phone rang again. I caught it before Wolfe could growl. It was Kramer. His voice had lost the gravel. Now it was just tired. Wolfe there? He's here, I said. Want him or me? Both, he said. Tell him the lab confirmed your resin sample. Same composition as adhesive from the King's Masquerade's prop department. You were right. Wolfe's brows arched when I relayed it. He took the receiver. I commend your efficiency, Inspector. Kramer grunted. Don't get fancy, I'm not clearing veil yet. But, there was a pause, I'm not calling it suicide anymore. That will suffice for now, Wolfe said. Good evening. He hung up gently, almost satisfied. I leaned back in my chair. So the cops are warming up to your performance. An overdue awakening, he murmured. The lamplight flickered on the brass globe by his desk. Outside, Manhattan was quiet, the kind of quiet that means everyone's waiting for the next headline. Wolfe leaned back, eyes half closed as though already hearing the applause. Archie, he said. Yeah? Try not to embellish in your report. The truth suffices, sometimes. I grinned. Don't worry, I'll keep it dull enough to be credible. He snorted, drained his beer, and reached for another envelope. Tomorrow, he said, the final act begins. Fritz will call us for dinner. Good, I said, standing. All this talk of poisons made me hungry. He closed his eyes, already retreating to thought. Archie, he said softly, I admire your appetite. It is the only thing about you that approaches mine. Thanks, I said, but I'm still skipping the cyanide course. He didn't answer. The office filled with the ticking of the clock and the faint scent of coffee cooling. Outside, a cab backfired, echoing like a starter's pistol. Inside, the great Nero Wolfe sat waiting for his curtain call. If Wolfe ever directed a play, actors would confess by intermission. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, the brownstone office had turned into his private theatre, and every seat was filled. The players weren't much for applause, but the atmosphere could have been bottled and sold as suspense number 5. Celia Vale sat nearest the globe, hands folded like a schoolgirl waiting for judgment. She wore black silk, understated but not modest, mourning with dignity or strategy. Gil Danton lounged by the wall, pretending at ease, his face powdered for the part, but the sweat giving him away. Marvin Lott, Kessler's accountant, clutched his hat as though it were a life-preserver, and Penny Drew, a chorus girl with nerves built from cigarette ash and rouge, perched on the edge of her chair, chewing her lip like she was auditioning for the role of terrorized blonde number 3. The set was classic Wolfe, curtains half drawn, lamplight warm but interrogative, beer glass sweating on his desk. Fritz had cleared the lunch trays an hour ago, and now the only aroma was anticipation and guilt. Wolfe sat back, mountainous and calm, fingertips touching. I had the typewriter ready, but this wasn't for dictation. It was for posterity. Ladies and gentlemen, Wolfe began, his tone as smooth as polished walnut. We convene to clarify the lamentable deaths of Howard Kessler and Miss Lorna Price. I have, to my dissatisfaction, heard many lies since this affair began. I shall hear no more. Celia's eyes flicked up, wide and pleading. Mr. Wolfe, He silenced her with a raised finger. Madam, you shall speak when relevance demands it. That set the tempo. Even the clock held its breath. Gil Danton gave a dry chuckle. This sounds like a rehearsal, not an investigation. Indeed, Wolfe said mildly. And you, sir, have played several parts already. Stage manager, confidant, and, I fear, murderer. Danton's grin froze. You'd better be careful with that word. Archie Goodwin, your humble narrator, decided to stir the pot. Relax, Gil. Wolfe doesn't use the word murderer lightly. He saves it for people who earn it. That earned me a glare, but Wolfe continued as if lecturing a class of particularly slow pupils. Mr. Kessler, though lamentably theatrical in temperament, was a man of meticulous accounts. He discovered irregularities in his company's finances, irregularities traced through your hand, Mr. Lott. The accountant jerked like someone had stepped on his tail. That's impossible. I kept the books straight. Indeed, Wolfe said, so straight that they circled back on themselves. The forged entries were clever, but not clever enough. Kessler prepared to expose you, and you confided your peril to Mr. Danton. I didn't, Lott sputtered. Wolfe ignored him. Danton saw an opportunity. He proposed a solution: permanent silence for Kessler and protection for himself, who had joined in your diversions. A partnership in crime rarely sustains harmony. Celia gasped. That's monstrous. Gil couldn't— Miss Vale, Wolfe interrupted, please contain your sympathies. The man you defend sought your death. That did it. The silence cracked like a whip. Danton surged to his feet. Now wait a minute. Sit, Wolfe said, with such gravity that even the upholstery creaked in obedience. Danton sat. I took a quiet pleasure in watching Wolfe at work, not the florid genius of the orchid rooms, but the chess master with his pawns sweating under scrutiny. His gaze pinned Danton now, precise and merciless. The poisoned champagne, Wolfe said, was not intended for Kessler, but for Miss Vale. The lipstick traces, the same shade appearing twice on opposite rims, proved the glass passed between them. You poisoned her drink during the toast. Kessler's gallantry cost him his life. That's insane, Danton hissed. No, Wolfe said softly. Merely theatrical. You are accustomed to timing cues and sleight of hand. The prop man's craft, of which I have physical proof. He turned to me. Archie. I stepped forward and placed the evidence envelope on his desk. Inside lay the bracelet, gleaming blue under the lamplight. Recognize this, Danton? I asked. He glanced once, then shrugged. Sure, it's Celia's. Everyone in the company saw it. True, Wolfe said, but only one of you handled it with stage adhesive. The resin on the clasp is identical to that used for securing false jewels in your production. You transferred it there when you prepared to frame Miss Vale. You pawned it under Lorna Price's name to divert suspicion. When she realized the trick, you silenced her as well. Penny Drew gave a little squeak. Oh, Lord, she whispered. I told him not to go near her that night. Penny, Danton barked. Too late. Wolfe's brow lifted like a curtain rising on Act 3. Indeed, Miss Drew? She froze. I gave her the easy smile. You might as well finish the line. The audience is all ears. She swallowed. He said he was just going to talk to her. Said Lorna was making trouble. I didn't think he meant to. Enough, Danton roared, standing again. His face had gone a lovely shade of crimson that would have made a fine stage light. Sit down, I said, moving a step closer, or I'll help you rehearse it. He glared, breathing hard. You think you can prove any of this? It's talk. You've got no witness. Wolfe's tone was almost gentle. Mr. Danton, every liar convinces himself that words are weapons. In truth, they are shackles. You have forged yours admirably. He gestured toward the bracelet. This trinket binds you more securely than steel. For a long moment, the room was a tableau. Wolfe still as a monument, Danton trembling, Celia white and motionless, Penny sobbing softly into her hands. Then Danton lunged. He didn't make it far. I intercepted him halfway to the door. Years of fieldwork have taught me that a man guilty of murder rarely rehearses his exits. I caught his arm, spun him, and before he could try again, he was reacquainted with the wall. You're finished, I told him. He sagged, breath hissing. It was supposed to be her, he muttered. She was going to ruin us. Kessler, that sanctimonious, he made her his queen and left us to starve. Ah, Wolfe said, almost sadly. So it is jealousy after all. A tawdry motive, but enduring. I reached for the phone. I'll ring Kramer. No need, came a gravelly voice from the doorway. Kramer himself filled it, cigar clenched, eyes like thunderclouds. Stebbins hovered behind him, smug as a terrier. Nice timing, I said. In theatre or murder, Inspector, timing is everything. Kramer's eyes swept the room. Looks like the show's over. Danton, you'll come with us. Danton started to speak, but Kramer's hand shot up. Save it for the DA. He turned to Wolfe, tugging the cigar from his teeth. All right, you were right. Again, you usually are, and I hate it every time. Wolfe inclined his head. A mutual discomfort, Inspector, yet we persist. Kramer snorted and gestured to Stebbins, who cuffed Danton and led him out. Penny followed, pale and shaky. Lot mumbled something about lawyers and fled. That left Celia, trembling but still composed. She looked at Wolfe. "Then I'm cleared?" "Of guilt, yes," he said. "Of foolish trust, perhaps not." Her lips quivered. "You're very cruel, Mr. Wolfe," he sighed. "No, madam. Merely accurate." She left quietly, dignity trailing behind her like perfume. When the door closed, I turned to Wolfe. "Another standing ovation for you. You should take it to Broadway." He grunted. "Bah! The theatre is a sanctuary for vanity and deceit. I prefer orchids. They do not lie." "Maybe not," I said, flipping my notebook shut, "but they also don't pay 5,000 retainers." He opened one eye. "Archie, I shall pretend I didn't hear that." "Sure, and I'll pretend you didn't enjoy the performance." The faintest flicker, not quite a smile, more like a tremor of satisfaction, crossed his mouth. "Archie," he said, "fetch Fritz. Beer for me, coffee for you. Then, if you must, file your report, but spare me your embellishments." "Can't promise that," I said, grinning. "A good story deserves good dialogue." He sighed, leaned back and closed his eyes. "Phooey, leave me to my silence." I did. As I passed the desk, the bracelet caught the light, blue stones winking like stage lamps after the curtain falls. The show was over, but Wolfe's theatre never really closed. Somewhere beyond the city hum, orchids waited, innocent and silent, the only audience he'd ever trust.